Let's do it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Blake White, and I am the founding artistic and executive director of Lean Ensemble Theater. And I also am playing the Legionnaire in our current production, our co production with Furman University of Heidi Schreck's What the Constitution Means to Me. I am zooming in from the beautiful Hilton Head Main Street Theater. And we are delighted to have some very special people with us today. But here on the couch with me, I'm Blake. I'm playing the Legionnaire.
I'm Carrie. I am lucky enough to be playing Heidi.
I'm Bella, and I'm the debater.
And I'm Megan, and I directed the show.
So we are very lucky today to have a couple of people with us. First is the woman who wrote this play, and Heidi, with your permission, I'm just going to read something that came from Lincoln Center. That old gem, that old
Sure, let's do it.
Heidi Schreck's most recent credit was an adaptation of Uncle Vanya at Lincoln Center starring Steve Carell. She is a writer and performer living in Brooklyn. My wife and I got married in Park Slope. Her critically acclaimed play, What the Constitution Means to Me, which is the most produced play in the United States for the second year in a row, produced on Broadway by Ms. Mila Lerner, played an extended sold-out run on Broadway in 2019 and was nominated for 2 Tony Awards. It had subsequent runs at the Kennedy Center, the Mark Taper Forum, the Guthrie, Seattle Rep, and at theaters all over the country. A filmed version premiered on Amazon Prime and was nominated for a Critics' Choice Award, a Producers Guild Award, and a Directors Guild Award. What the Constitution Means to Me was named Best Play of the Year by the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, Time Magazine, the Hollywood Reporter, the New Yorker, and more. Her other plays include Grand Concourse, Creature, and There Are No More Big Secrets, and they have also been produced in New York City and throughout the United States. Her screenwriting credits include I Love Dick, Billions, Nurse Jackie, Dispatches from Elsewhere. She is the recipient of 3 Obie Awards, a Drama Desk Award, a Theater World Award, as well as the Horton Foote Playwriting Award and the Hull Warrior Award from the Dramatists Guild. She has also worked as a teacher and journalist in St. Petersburg, Russia, and has done live simultaneous translations of plays by Chekhov, Gorky, and Ostrovsky. Thank you.
Ostrovsky. Thank you. Thank you, Heidi.
She was also awarded the Smithsonian Magazine's 2019 American Ingenuity Award for her work in the performing arts. So let's pause for Hilton Head Island to give you a thunderous round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
for having me. I'm really very, very happy to be here, and sorry I can't be there in person, but thank you for having me.
Our moderator this morning is one of my favorite people in the entire world. She is a professor emeritus of the School of Education at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut, where she served as both chair and director of the Master of Arts teaching program. She is currently an adjunct professor at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, in the Department of Education. She has a doctorate in English, and her graduate research focused on American literature with a concentration on African American women writers. She is committed to promoting cultural literacy in schools and communities. She has also worked as a diversity trainer for the Anti-Defamation League and the Connecticut State Department of Education, and has conducted anti-bias workshops for community organizations and public school teachers and school leaders in Connecticut and South Carolina. She is the author of the book Justice in Search of Leaders, a handbook for equity-driven school leadership. She has published numerous articles and chapters on cultural diversity, social change, and the achievement gap. Her monthly column, Diversity 101, appeared in Hilton Head Monthly and Bluffton Monthly magazines, and she is also a board member of Lean Ensemble Theater. Dr. Gloria Holmes. Thank you so much, Gloria. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you, Heidi, for being here. I love that your children are in the next room watching. whatever that is.
They are there now. It's possible they'll be here occasionally. We'll see.
That's real life.
That is real life.
And I love it. And I'd like to thank the Hilton Head audience who are joining us today. If you haven't seen the play yet, hopefully listening to us talk about it will stimulate you to buy a ticket. Anyway, Heidi, I'm all ready. So my first question for you, Heidi, is your play forces audiences to confront the question of whether or not the Constitution is alive or dead. And until recently, I actually believe that most people thought of the Constitution as a dusty old dead thing created by dusty old white men and buried in a dusty old past. But you have called the Constitution a living document, suggesting that it is a vibrant, breathing, organic thing that is presumably as alive today as it was in 1789 when it was adopted. So here's my question. What convinces you that the Constitution is alive and not dead?
That is such an incredible question. And the truth is, I'm wondering that myself right now. I grew up being taught that it was a living document. I think that was a fairly common way to think about it when I was a kid in the 80s. It was kind of like right prior to when originalism started to sort of flourish in this country, with the idea that we're looking at something as that's a dead document and trying to interpret exactly what the founders wanted to do. So for me, I just took it for granted that it was a living document. And actually, when I started creating the play, I began to wonder if that was actually true. We haven't passed an amendment in this country since 1992. There are obviously forces in this country who want the document to mean the same thing that it meant before the Civil War. And there are forces in this country that I feel aligned with who think there's no way we can move forward as a country without thinking of this as a document that can live and grow and change. And I will just say, because you sent me some of these questions ahead of time and they're so brilliant, I thank you so much. I was looking at Justice Ketanji Jackson's view of this kind of beautiful living originalism, which is the thing I'm trying to embrace right now, which is the idea that, like, yes, it is a document that was created long ago, but it was created with the values of justice and equality in mind, and that those things we should be originalist about, and then how we interpret those things in the moment we're living, that's where the living part has to come in. Otherwise we're stuck, living in a society in which only cis white men with property are considered people.
I don't mean to laugh, but that is funny. All right, so if we concede, and this question is related to the first one, but if we concede that it's alive, the question still remains, is it relevant? And is it relevant in our time for us in the context of our daily lives, actually?
I mean, to me, it feels clearly relevant. Whether it's working as it was intended to do, as a document that creates a representative democracy and under which all people are equal, I don't think it's I don't think that the reality is meeting the ideal, but that's true about most things. I do feel like it definitely feels, I would be curious to ask you this question because I think you know a lot more than I do, but I feel like it feels very relevant in this moment we're living in right now, because it's something that provides a lot of guardrails for perpetuating democracy. Even if some of those guardrails feel like they aren't holding, or we're worried that they're not going to hold, they're clearly in place. It clearly represents values that we've all agreed upon for hundreds of years. So I think, yes, it's relevant. No, it's not working, I don't think, as well as it could be working.
Yeah. So, one of the things that sort of sparked that question when I was preparing it's just my personal feeling that I have had moments where I've asked myself, where am I? What country is this? And literal a sense of fear about the answers to those questions. And then the other thing that sort of encouraged my thinking about relevance is this. If the Constitution is not relevant and we associate the Constitution with a cluster of American values, does it mean that we are also making those values like freedom and justice and fair play and equality, are we making them irrelevant too? Or are they becoming less relevant? So I'm basically looking at the Constitution and our values. You know, if one sinks, if the Constitution goes down, our values are going down with it. At least that's the essence of why I thought about this question.
Yes. I mean, I agree with you. I feel like there's a point in the play when someone makes the debate point that it's right now the only thing standing between ourselves and tyranny is actually this document. And I do think there is although one, as citizens, most of us don't really know what's in the document. Secondly, we have different ideas about what we think it means or which rights and freedoms it should protect or how we foster and grow equality. Like, I do think that for the most part, it seems like as a country, we believe we can at least say the words equality, justice, freedom for all, equality under the law, and we all agree that those are good things. And I do think that, like, with if we start to consider the Constitution irrelevant, then I don't know what we're left with in terms of shared values, especially at a time when the country is so divided.
Yeah, what you made me think about, and this wasn't one of my original questions, but do we have to, because one of the things that comes up is reinventing it. Do we have to remake it? And I'm wondering if that's sort of in your thinking, because it comes up in the play. Should we redo the Constitution? And so my question kind of is, Phoenix-like, do you think the Constitution can rise from ashes? So, maybe this is just a statement, not a question, but does it have to get so bad that we have to rewrite it? Because I find it interesting that when people come to the play, they are given a constitution. So I think that's great because in general, people have not read it.
No, I think most of us, and I would have put myself in that category before making the play. Even though I did this contest as a kid, I would say that until I created the play, I didn't really know the Constitution particularly well. So I feel like most of us don't know what's in it. I mean, I think the debate in the play is there, in part to just inspire people to think about, like, what if it weren't there? Like, what would you want in its place? Like, if the creation were up to us or up to you, what do you want in its place? Because I think it is a document we've all taken for granted. We're taught in the vein of American exceptionalism that it's, the greatest constitution ever written, that it's a work of genius, that it's blah, blah, blah. And I feel like it's hard to consider our country without it. And it felt to me like a useful exercise just to think about, well, if you did have to start anew, what would you do differently? Or what would you do better? So I guess that's the frame in which the debate is made. I mean, the truth is, as you know, our Constitution is built to actually grow and change. Like, we could improve upon it. I just think that we're clearly stuck in the amending process. I mean, we can't get the Equal Rights Amendment to pass. So I have to believe there's a world in which, and maybe as this new generation starts coming into power, that we could start amending the document again to be more reflective of yeah, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but like substantive equality and not just this idea of like neutral equality.
Mhm. Thank you. What I'm loving is that we're talking about the Constitution. And to be honest, before your play, I don't remember the last time I had a conversation about the Constitution. And I'm an educator. Oh, yeah. So in early in the play, Heidi, you compare the Constitution to a crucible. So in preparation for this, I made sure that I went and found the definition. And a crucible is literally a heat-resistant container used to melt metals. Figuratively, however, a crucible can refer to a transformative experience, which can lead to a new identity or a new sense of identity. So I'd like to know if you could explain what you mean by that comparison, because later in the play, you suggest that perhaps we shouldn't see it as a crucible. So my question is, how should we see the Constitution?
Okay, my one caveat is that I did come up with that metaphor when I was 15 years old. It was the actual metaphor used in my speech. However, that said, I did keep it in the play for a reason. I'm sure my mom is the one who helped me come up with it. And it felt apt at the time, I thought, because it seemed like, as you said, it's a container for a transformative process that happens under a lot of heat and stress, and I would say in a kind of violent combination of things. If you think of heating things up as violent. So I decided to run with that metaphor, and it did feel appropriate in terms of like how the gains for different groups of people have been won throughout the centuries in this country. The transformation has been under intense pressure. It has been violent. It has been hard. It has been uncomfortable. It has been under through heat, I would say. And I think because I was thinking of the idea that kind of, and this is just my opinion, the way equality is framed in this country, it's like, well, everyone is equal, and that's a kind of neutral proposition, right? We all have the same opportunity to, make the most of our lives, pursue happiness, get an education, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we know in reality that's not true. People's access to all of those things are hampered by race, by sex, by gender, by class. And so it just started to occur to me that this metaphor in which like, okay, well, just come together and like, battle it out for your rights, which is how I started to see a crucible, is really, it seems maybe old-fashioned. It seems also violent in a way that I'm like, is it possible to imagine something new? And then looking at these 20th and 21st century constitutions, which are often positive rights constitutions, which say like, we're going to explicitly protect your rights, to say that like, if you are a young Black woman who does not have access to a good school, then we are not, that you're not equal under the law. Like, and it's the government's duty then to go to make sure that like people do have equal access to education, to services, in my neighborhood, for example, I live in a deep part of Brooklyn, transportation. It's like a transportation desert. And there are these constitutions that say, sort of put the onus on the government to actively create equality instead of just stepping back and saying, good luck, fight it out. We support your equality, but you got to figure it out yourself,
Okay. Well, you are talking to a Black woman, so know that I relate to all of that very personally. So this question is really directed at Heidi, Blake, and Megan. our director. The play itself, the play has been described as a living document because each production can be adapted to the location and the prevailing social and political conditions. And of course, there are extemporaneous moments and improvisations throughout the play. So my question is, what, if any, challenges does this pose to the integrity of the play? For example, the play just finished a run in Greenville. Were there different considerations because of the two different locations and two different audiences? Were there different production values? And a special question for Blake. Did you have to adapt the play to the unique milieu of Hilton Head?
You want to go first?
Sure. I talked a little bit about this in the talk back last night, but I think one of the things that is so lovely about producing this play is that it can be shaped in a way that is relevant to whichever audience you're meeting, while still being honest to the integrity of the facts that are offered in the script. And no matter what audience is watching the play, the primary purpose of our production is really to get the audience to start to think about the values that they hold and where those values have come from. And by looking at different perspectives, are you then challenged to reassess the values that you might hold? And I think one of the things that we were actually just talking about this morning at our girls' dorm, we're calling it, is that a sign of a really intelligent person is that they are able to change their perspectives throughout their life by adding more information and continuing to grow. And I think this is a really great example of that, because you see the 15-year-old version of Heidi, who then is able to reflect as a grown adult, who then is able to also honor a younger generation through the debate. And when we've been working on the show, we haven't explicitly made changes for our different audiences. However, because I work with very brilliant actors and collaborators, we have been able to acknowledge that doing this play on a college campus, right, there are different things that hit in different ways throughout the production. And it's really exciting because there's moments in the play that even talk about, like, the younger generation is shining a light back so that we can walk forward in this world, and empowering them through the play to really question and want more for themselves, I think is really special. And then as we moved to Hilton Head, we knew that we were not necessarily going to have as many folks in the audience of that younger generation. So there are different parts of the play that are going to hit. And last night, watching it for the opening night, I was really struck by how many people in the audience remembered the civil rights movement. And like that part in the play, they were almost wrapped with those memories in a way that, you know, we weren't present for, right? So I think certainly the script is going to hit differently, but we also don't have to do a lot production wise to change it for the audience. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Blake.
I was lucky enough. There have been a few times in my life since starting Lean where when Peggy is my wife, for those who don't know, and I are walking up the aisle during a show or after a show, that I know that one way or another I'm going to do it here. Doll's House Part 2 is another example. this play was certainly an example. And actually, we walked from the Helen Hayes Theater up to a restaurant on the Upper West Side where Mila and her husband were waiting for us. And Mila and I have this joke where she does not like me to hug her, but that was a night that she didn't get a choice. She didn't get because I was so immensely proud of her involvement with this show. And I pick plays purposefully with the milieu of Hilton Head in mind, with desire to spoon feed anyone and without any desire to force feed anyone. And if there's what this play does that's so magic to me, especially in the last 20 minutes, is I think a lot of people walk into that debate, or when they realize what's going on, they think they're going to say keep, they're going to say abolish. And then I think when the debate is done, they hesitate. And I think that's what good theater does. It doesn't tell you what, it just says consider. And so, no, I knew that this play was going to say something here, and that's why I think it's being done all over the country in places far more liberal and far more conservative than Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina. It has been fascinating doing it in a 90-seat thrust in Greenville, South Carolina on a college campus versus a 220-seat proscenium on Hilton Head Island. And the irony is, I would say last night was our most involved audience. They were the loudest, which was great and a wonderful surprise.
Heidi, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I'm so excited to hear that. And that was my experience performing the play too, that it sort of felt like it morphed depending on who was watching, but it has different things to offer different people. And then I will say, in terms of the play being a living document, it was very much my hope that as it went out into the country that that I would and I have sort of let go control of it, much the way, I want the people who take it on to make it theirs and to engage with it in the way that makes the most sense for their community. And I've left things open in the play so that that can happen. And it makes me really feel excited that that's how it's working. That feels like it mirrors the process of democracy to me, to allow the play to be democratic in a way, which is a little bit scary, but also has been really moving to me.
Thank you. Megan, I just want to comment on something you said. You said that it's a sign of intelligence if you have the ability to change your perspective when new information has been received. And I'm wondering why politicians haven't figured that out.
Preach, Gloria.
So, Blake, and this is for both you and Megan, and maybe you've already begun to answer this question, but it's not lost on any of us that a play called What the Constitution Means to Me is scheduled in Hilton Head 3 days before the election.
What?
So, the question
That's the big
question is, what did you hope to achieve by the timing? And what, if any, challenges did you face because of the increasingly toxic political environment?
Well, I've written about this. Megan and I have spoken about this. Carrie and I have spoken about this. Bella and I are about to speak about this. We wanted to originally do it at 2022, but the rights were not available yet. And then we just decided it was time to swing for the fences and do it. And do it in October of 2024. And this is, of course, these decisions happen 18 months, sometimes as many as 2 years prior to the actual opening night. So we had no idea that who the candidates for this election would be. We had no idea that a woman would be running again. There was no crystal ball involved with any of that. And there is a certain fortitude that it takes to just sort of plan in advance and hope that it all works out. And then, of course, there's been internal and external nerves about doing this play in this community right now. And I think no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you're full of nerves right now. There's just, that's how most normal people would feel. But Carrie, in our first week of rehearsal, said something that struck me that we talked about last night. She said that no matter what happens on Tuesday and in the days that follow this coming Tuesday, doing this play next weekend might be the most important work that we do. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that I think pushes us a little forward, knowing that we're doing something worthwhile right now. So was it specifically planned for this? Yes, I suppose the answer to that is yes. Is it daunting? Yes. Are things that are daunting worthwhile? 100%.
I think too.
Go lean ensemble.
I was just gonna add, I think one of the other reasons that Blake and I were excited to do a co-production was that I really felt like our students on campus were going to need opportunities to process what was going on in the world. And this play affords us an opportunity to process the way that the Constitution impacts our lives without a distinctly partisan, you should do this as a call to action, right? I think the call to action is more humanitarian and more thoughtful. And I mean, my partners on campus who were interested in sponsoring the show, from the Riley Institute to the Communication Studies Department to Politics and International Affairs, they were so excited to do this play around election time because there were opportunities to engage with the students both before and after the production with events that could get them to actually be in dialogue with one another without having to say, I'm voting this way, right? And so that's been a really exciting part of doing this show across the state, quite literally, so that people can be in dialogue with one another without having to, stake their claim, whether they're red or blue.
I love that, Megan, and it's the educator in me that's always trying to find those teachable moments that we can expand and make sure that we're not dealing with things of importance like Band-Aids, because if you're really bleeding because someone stabbed you in the heart, a Band-Aid is not going to keep you alive. So I love the educating of students, and hopefully those dialogues will continue and there will be no end to those dialogues. So Heidi, of course, the title of your play is quite provocative, and I think it's both simple and profound. In a sense, as an English teacher, I saw it as a statement and also kind of as a question. And I think that's part of the brilliance of the play, because when anyone utters the title, they're also asking themselves the question. And the answer that they give will be very personal. And to put my own personal frame of reference into it, when I asked the question, I framed it from the perspective of a Black woman whose ancestors had been oppressed by enslavement. So my question is, was this part of your original designed to encourage self-reflection and to force each of us to sort of embrace the question differently, what the Constitution means to me.
Thank you for that. It means a lot to me, especially from an English teacher, which is my mother's also one, that you like the title. Thank you. Truly. I will say this, that I first chose the title because it's the title of the assignment we're so often given in junior high or even high school, to say like, oh, what the Constitution means to me. And I write a little paper. And so I consciously chose it because it has that kind of like student feeling to it. And then of course I chose it because I realized that when I did the contest at 15, I didn't yet know how to answer that question truthfully or meaningfully. And so the task I gave myself when I was writing the show was like, what if I answered that question as honestly as I could now as a middle-aged woman? Like, what would it mean to actually engage with that question deeply? So yes, ultimately I came to exactly what you're saying, that the title felt like it was me doing that meaningfully, and then hoping that like if you saw the show, it might excite you to do the same, an audience member to do the same.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, because even when you're telling someone that you saw the play, you're kind of inviting them to think about, well, what does the Constitution mean to me? So I think it's a wonderful way to keep the conversation or the reflection about it going on. So in one scene, Heidi, you gave statistics about the sexual abuse of women, and you state that 1 in 4 women has been sexually abused in this country. I am a survivor of sexual abuse, so those statistics were personally impactful. So given those ratios, we can always assume that in your audience, there'll be quite a few women who also have been sexually abused and for whom this is very personal. So my question is kind of twofold. What do you want those women to take away from the play? And how and what do you want them to feel? And similarly, what do you want the men in the audience to take away? What do you want them to think or feel? Because so much of the play is about your grandmother, great-grandmother, and the abuse that they sustained.
I think to answer the first part of the question, for the women in the audience, my hope with the statistics and with all of the play really is that people who have shared those experiences, people who have been assaulted or gone through abuse, feel the extent to which they're not alone. I feel like the statistics tell you that, and hopefully the stories tell you that. And because I got to perform it myself so many times, I've gotten to speak to a lot of people who've seen the show, who and the thing that moved me the most is actually a lot of women talking about how it opened up conversations between them and their mothers, either mothers sharing stories that they hadn't shared before or vice versa. And I found that people seem grateful for that. I will also say it opened up more of an even wider conversation between my mother and I. She told me about her childhood I knew about it from the time I was pretty small, but it just opened up more complicated, deeper, more connected conversations between her and I about that.
Mm-hmm.
For men, I guess again, I will say, like, because I'm playmaker, I was led a little bit by the form, and like in the form of debate, you use statistics. That's part of what you do. So it felt like I had to do it to honor the form of the thing that I'd made, but also I really wanted men to hear those statistics, everyone to hear those statistics in the context then of hearing, in a larger context, you know what I mean? Like to be able to hear those statistics after like kind of going through a boot camp, like of the 14th Amendment, and then also in relationship to hearing someone's personal stories and how that affected them, their mom, their grandmother, knowing that like they're maybe sitting with a woman that it has affected, or it affected them or their mother. I just wanted those statistics I felt would be more meaningful in the context of all the stories that are told in the play.
Mhm.
And maybe make them think, maybe make all of us think.
You've sort of begun to answer this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and maybe you can elaborate a bit. Again, I'm personalizing it so that I thought about this as a Black woman of African descent, a woman who can trace her ancestry to people who've been enslaved right here in South Carolina on a rice plantation. So racist oppression and history, validating my history is very important to me. But I use them in my teaching and in my writing, and yet there's always an emotional cost. So I see a parallel with you as a woman, an actor, a playwright. History and sexual oppression are very personal to you. So my question is, or the point that I'm making is, you dramatize that part of your history. And I want to know if there's an emotional cost to you, because this is so personal to you, and it goes back multiple generations of females in your family. And so is the play part of the healing? And is there an emotional cost for you revisiting this oppressive, sexualized oppression that many females in your family experienced?
I would say yes to both. It definitely, I feel like the act of making the show, creating it, and performing it, I think healed or transformed something for me in terms of my relationship to myself as a woman in this country and in this culture. And it definitely, as I said, deepened my relationship with my mom, and also made me understand. I mean, I'm also recently a parent. I have 4-year-old twins, so that has also changed my view of my mom. But really deeply understanding what my mom was living through, what my grandma was living through, what my great grandma was living through. It's just made me feel so much, I guess, love for women in my family and for women in this country, and for all people in this country who suffer various forms of oppression. So I would say it was healing in that sense. It did take a toll, and I would say if I had to do one thing over, I would not perform it 8 times a week. It was a lot of times a week. And I got kind of ground down by the end of it. But it did feel, and because people responded the way they did, and because it felt like it was healing for other people, it did feel, I felt like I knew why I was out there. You know what I mean? It felt like I had a purpose being out there, and it felt like an optimistic thing to do, and not just reveling in sort of sadness or grief. It felt like a crucible, I guess. So yeah. But I do find it hard now to think about. I don't know if I'll perform it again. I probably will someday, but it's like also being a new parent, I'm like, it feels, that also feels like it would be kind of interesting and hard to perform now being, I have two girls, so yeah.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to ask a question of Carrie.
Hi.
I was so reading the script of the play is one thing, realizing how much weight the Heidi character carries throughout that play, but seeing it performed was a whole nother experience. So I was wondering, Carrie, what are the challenges of being so central to that entire play and that script for what, 90 minutes? How exhausting was that for you?
Um, I mean, I sleep well at night. Um, but I don't, someone asked last night, like, how do you sort of like keep up the ability slash desire to do it every night? And I think it sort of goes right back to what Heidi said and what I said last night was, it does feel like we're we're doing important work and not just the kind of like, oh, a lot of people will say like every time I do a show, it's important work. And yes, it is. But this play, it offers people solace. Like Heidi was saying, it offers people the opportunity to think deeply about things. And so it feels like, we're out here doing the Lord's work. Um, and it just is something that feels like it aligns with my own mission statement as a human being. So it feels like that is enough to like get you out of bed in the morning, easy. And so it feels like a commission. It feels like a really great, important thing to do. Um, and I will say, like, I never am getting in the car on the way to the theater being like, oh man, I got to do it. I'm like really excited every single time.
It was wonderful watching you. And thank you for that. And those of you who haven't seen the play, look for the dancing Carrie.
Heidi, this is something that I've been curious about since we were doing this, and there is that space for each Heidi to sort of be their own Heidi. And you, in your production and in the script, took such delight in the log running moment.
Yes.
Uh, Megan, our beautiful and perceptive director, she was like, I think you really do take the most joy in Patrick Swayze, Carrie. Sort of posed this idea to me, like, it's so close to the log running moment. She's like, do you want to dance?
Yes.
So I dance with an invisible Patrick Swayze.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
Megan and I and Blake was in the room at the time, and we're like, we think this would be blessed by Heidi.
This was
Yeah, I could not be more excited. I can't believe I didn't think of it, but I could not be more excited.
it was truly awesome.
That is
He has the line, this is my favorite part of the play, and he can't say anything because that lines. It is also my favorite part. It's a true delight to witness every night.
Yeah, I made a Pinterest board in preparation, and Megan, I shared it with Megan, and she was like, Carrie, come on, I saw your Pinterest board. History, 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 and then just a constant scroll of
Like
Patrick.
it's like Patrick Swayze.
It's very important. Positive male energy. It's very important.
It was really fantastic. So I have a question for you, Bella. So I want you to talk about, well, a couple of things. One, what the role means to you, but something that Megan said a few minutes ago about the impact of the play on students. And I'm not sure if you're a student there at Furman or not, but apparently your age, and everybody looks young to me these days, but makes me think that you may be college aged. So can you talk about the playing the role from the vantage point of an actor, but also playing the role from the vantage point of that very deeply important question about the Constitution? Because we always talk about the future and the young people who are going to have to shape it. So I'm wondering if playing this role has any larger significance for you.
So it does, especially for me. I am still in high school, but I just turned 18, so I am a new voter. I have already early voted, so that was really special. But I feel like voting felt almost more significant because of this show and because of the perspective being a debater has given me, as well as just sitting backstage and like hearing what Heidi has to say every night. I feel like every night, no matter like what the audience is or where we are, like I feel like the dialogue that it creates is so important. And I feel like hearing these facts and these statistics make it almost more important that people my age do vote because, you know, the Constitution was written 200 years ago, but today it still affects us so much. And yet, as young people, you know, like we're not necessarily at a stage like of maturity where we think about it that deeply, but it we really kind of do have to because we're the next generation. Like we have to start making decisions and acting in ways that'll help us down the road. And I feel like as a young person getting to share this show with other young people such as Furman students and then even like my own peers, like some of my friends did come to see the show. I feel like hearing what they have to say about it is even more important to me because it just shows that A, we're doing what we're supposed to, and then B, it's allowing them to kind of start thinking about the things that are gonna be super important down the road. And I have a couple friends that came that, you know, they don't necessarily like think very academically or necessarily care about the Constitution, but afterwards, like they were talking to me about it and they were like, you know, like it's so important. They were like, I'm now registered to vote, which I think is another great thing about this show is it's very encouraging of that. Um, but then it also allows them to feel like they have a voice. And as an individual, this show has made me feel like my voice is important. I've done theater for a long time, but never once have I really felt like I've done something so important to the time we live in. And it's so true too. And as a minority and a female, it's, you know, like getting to represent my people feels even more important. And I think having young people feel like they are represented in theater and in this world is also important because they're like, that is me. And I feel like the show's given me that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Always the teacher, I'm always wondering how we can make what we do meaningful for students in deeply felt ways. So I love your answer. This may have been kind of addressed a little bit already, Heidi, but this is directed to Heidi, Blake, and Megan. I read several of the reviews of your great play. One of them was written by someone named Jesse Green, and he called what the Constitution means to me, quote, a tragedy told as a comedy, unquote, and quote, a work of inspired protest, unquote. So is that what the play is trying to do? Balance tragedy, comedy, and protest? And any of you, please feel free to respond.
I mean, I'll start and just say like, I never, yes, absolutely. No, the truth is I never know what a play is trying to do until I finish it or even am performing it. So I will, but I like that description of it. I do think some of the comedy and comes from just my own view of the world and my own like tolerance for, I find it hard, like many of us do, to sit with very, very tragic things without having some like framework of humor to get through it. And I think all the women in my family that I describe were that way too. They're all very funny women. So that's just sort of comes out of my worldview. I think I will give credit to my original director, Oliver Butler, for helping shape it into a work of protest. We went back and forth for a long time about what the ending should be, and the debate kind of came late, and it was sort of a melding of minds. Like there were various ways the play was going to end, and I think he really supported and pushed the idea of the debate, which is what I feel like kind of turns it into an act of protest. And so I give him great credit for that. And I'm excited that it turned into that. I don't think that I thought when I started writing it that it would become that.
Okay. Megan, I think you were going to say something.
I was not.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I mean, I will say that I think so many plays in the world have learned the lesson that a really deep conversation cannot be had without levity.
Mm,
It makes it all more palatable, and that's sort of it sounds a little like, ooh, it makes it more palatable, but if we can laugh about anything, we become more open and receptive to what someone else is saying. And it's not that we ever want the audience to be laughing at what's going on, but laughing with us as we try to sort through things as artists. And I think laughter and joy really opens our souls.
I think for me, it also, in addition to being palatable, and I think you're saying this too, it also just feels like what's truest to me. I mean, there are very few people, particularly who go through really hard things, who do it without a sense of humor. Like humor is like innate to our humanity, and like to portray, to leave it out of the conversation, I think is to not present the fullness of a human being as well.
I just think the humor in this show too, where it where it shows up, and I've experienced it so much more since we've added the audience, is that it's also remarkably compassionate where it falls. It yeah, it doesn't take the foot off the gas, but it sort of gives you just this little moment that is compassionate, where you can just like take a breath, smile, and then reopen yourself up to the next bit of information. So I watch the audience take the humor as a moment of compassion nightly, which is beautiful.
thank you. It occurred to me, Heidi, that part of the brilliance of your work is that you were able to find humor in the Constitution.
Yes, totally.
Period.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think this is going to be my last question, and I think Amanda may have some questions from the audience, but again, it's the English teacher part of me. And English teachers always like to use the word romanticize. So I think that there is a tendency to romanticize America and the American story. So do you think that our tendency to romanticize our history, our story, the Constitution, or who we are, city on a hill kind of thing, does this pose a challenge to serious critique of the Constitution? Because many might see it as sacred and inviolable. So and then the other question that I wrote to myself, can you continue to talk about American exceptionalism and simultaneously expose America's weaknesses in our founding document? Can all of that coexist?
I mean, I have an answer. I feel I'm so curious actually how you feel, but to me yes, the romanticizing our country and its values and our Constitution in particular, it clearly can be dangerous, right? It prevents us from looking at what's really going on. But I also feel like there's another side to it, which is I do feel like romanticizing equality and justice and all, like having a great love and passion for the things, the values that we all want to manifest. I think it has its benefits. I think it's what makes the country really complicated and also really beautiful. And I don't believe in American exceptionalism. I think that exceptionalism in general is just a bad idea. I think it's a flawed, fucked up country, excuse me. But I also think it was built on beautiful, an attempt to create values that I think most of us can believe in. And so I do think the things that can coexist. And in fact, the only way to truly love the country and to truly love the values and try to manifest them is to be willing to critique where we're falling short. And not just where the country's falling short, but we as people, as humans, as voters, as individuals, as citizens, as white people, and so on.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
I love this country that we live in, and I also love being a married man to the woman that I am married to, and I don't know any other place where a person looks at me and wishes for me to do better than my marriage.
Yeah.
To that, and I think the same of her. So I always think like this, when we love something so deeply, we want it to be better. It's just an inherent desire, and there's nothing wrong with wanting that, while also realizing that perfection will never be attained. We'll always be striving to be better. We are in pursuit of something that we cannot get to. So I feel like it is a false argument to say that you are unpatriotic if you don't blindly love this country. I believe that you are actually the ideal patriot if you are saying this is what we could do better, because that's how this is still a living document. They knew, as screwed up as it was, they knew that they wanted to create something that would evolve with time. And I'm sorry, I get hung up on this metaphor of marriage. When you're married, people change over the years. You evolve and you want to evolve together, and that takes work and effort. So yes, we can absolutely love this thing that we find grossly imperfect and love it with our deepest soul. At least that's how I hope my wife feels about me. Is she watching? I don't know. I do have Ms. Dr. Holmes, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And Heidi, it's 11:04. Are you okay for a couple more minutes?
I think I am. Yes. Yes.
And pardon me for looking at my phone.
No, that's
logically sound,
yeah.
so Amanda is texting them to me. You talk in the show about people having two or more versions of themselves, the two different versions of your mother, your grandmother, etc. How did you describe the version of you before writing this play and the version of yourself after going through writing that writing process? And then I would also add, and then performing it on top. That's
a great question. I I think the version of me before writing and creating this play was a lot more ignorant about the history of our country and about how law actually works and how the Constitution works. But beyond that, I think I was, I know how to say this. I think I saw myself and my journey as a person as being very, a little bit in a vacuum. And I think after writing and performing and creating the play, I see myself as like part of a culture and part of a country and part of a history, and having a place in that history, that my, both my flaws and my, gifts are related to where I am situated in history. And I find that, both humbling and also kind of empowering. And also I think I'm a person who has a lot more empathy for I have a lot more empathy in general, I think, after like what I learned by performing the play, and a greater commitment to activism for sure. I also just want to say, because I saw it pop up here, hi Connie from Wenatchee. That's very exciting that someone from Wenatchee was at the play last night. Hello.
Yeah, we did. We met them.
Can the facts quoted in the play be updated? Are they getting worse?
It's so there is a little note in the script to update them. So I believe the statistics we were just quoted are probably what they are exactly right now. I monitor them and they sort of go up and down, I think between like 1 and 4 and 1 and 3 in terms of those statistics. My sense is they're holding pretty strong, which is terrible, and that they got very much worse during COVID, which I think we all know, violence toward women and children in particular really spiked during COVID.
I think this is a good final question, but I will leave that to Dr. Holmes. How can we get politicians to listen?
Good question.
I mean, I wish I knew. I will say I do all the things probably all of you do, which is, I vote, I call my reps, I write postcards. I've been canvassing this election, which is not the same as getting politicians to listen, but they always say that politics moves downward from culture. So I do think like telling our own stories and making art, it can be an effective way to help change culture, which then changes politics. But yeah, and then also I will say, and I think most people are onto this and by now, like really participating at a local level and a state level. Like before I did the show too, I was not into local politics, and now I am. I also give to Save Our States. I do a lot of like local and state advocacy and donating, because I realize how many important decisions are actually not made at the top, but made at state and local levels. Or run for office, which
I would just say this final thing before I give it back to Dr. Holmes. I've been talking to Carrie about this play since 2020. I've been talking to Megan about this play since 2021, and I've been talking to Bella about this play since August. It has been an absolute dream to work on, and a dream to work on in this moment. And I think Mila's listening, and I remain so delighted to be involved with a person who saw something in this play back in 2018 and 19 to support it and put it on Broadway. So that's
Thank
what
you. I feel the same way about Mila. Thank you, Mila. You're the greatest, and I am so grateful to you as well.
I would like to sort of add to the response to the question that Blake asked about how can you get politicians? How did you say that, Blake?
Well, it was a submitted question. The question was, how do we get politicians to listen?
Okay. And assuming listen and change and grow. I would just end by giving this thought about that. I used to say to my students, in terms of learning and growing, why it was important for them to learn, because my students were all going to be teachers. I'm a teacher educator, essentially. And my question to them always was, would you want to be operated on by a doctor who had not learned anything new in the last 20 years? The answer is self-explanatory, I think. So it kind of goes along with the idea of the Constitution being alive and being amendable and making it grow and fit our needs. To me, that's the only thing that we can do if we want to survive. So that's my final comment, Blake.
I love that. I agree with you.
Thank you, Heidi Schreck, for being a part of this morning with us. Thank you, Gloria Holmes, for asking these questions. Thank you to everybody on this couch for being a part of this production. And thank you to the thousands and thousands of people.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Connie. All right.
Thank you, Mila.
Thank you, Mila.
End it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there it goes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Shut it down.